Today, I'm going to tell you about the darkest bargain etched into the history books. The silent scream of a tiny girl hidden behind white silk fabrics, golden crowns, and the light of a colossal cathedral. Imagine this: November 1st, 1396. St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Thousands of candlelight flames are dancing, and the sound of the organ is vibrating the Gothic windows. Royal soldiers are advancing, and waiting for her at the altar is a 29-year-old, mature king. But who is this bride? Her name is Isabelle of France. Her height doesn't even reach the level of a table. She is crushed under the weight of the crown placed on her head. Because Isabelle is only 6 years old. She was 6 years old, a child who should have been playing with her peers, listening to fairy tales on her mother's lap, will be proclaimed Queen of England in a few minutes. This marriage is the seal of a political alliance that will change the fate of two nations. However, this marriage would destroy the life of a little girl. Today, we will talk about the most innocent victim of medieval diplomacy, the child Queen Isabelle. I warn you now, because this story will make your heart ache. Friends, to understand what happened to Isabelle, we must first look at the dark environment she was in: 14th century France. It was less a kingdom and more an area of chaos. November 9th, 1389. Isabelle was born in the Louvre Palace, the fourth daughter of King Charles VI of France and Queen Isabelle of Bavaria. Little Isabelle's birth should have been welcomed with joy and her future looked upon with hope. But it wasn't. Isabelle was born into an already very dark environment. Her father, Charles VI, was known as Charles the Mad. Yes, you heard correctly. The king had been suffering from recurring, terrifying bouts of madness since the age of 24. Just imagine this. The leader of your country is determining its fate one moment, and the next, he's running naked through the palace corridors, convinced that he'll shatter if anyone touches him. Or he doesn't recognize his own family and treats them like enemies. France was a puppet state ruled by a madman. While the king lived in his own mental world, the kingdom was on the verge of collapse. There was a relentless struggle to fill the power vacuum. The Armagnacs and the Burgundians. These two factions were locked in a bloody power struggle that brought the country to the brink of civil war. And her mother, Isabelle of Bavaria, she was a figure as controversial as her husband. Historians describe her as an ambitious and ruthless woman. She took advantage of her husband's illness to amass a fortune for herself. Rumors of her having lovers at court were rampant. But do you know what was most terrifying? Her viewing her own children as commodities for sale. For Isabelle and her other daughters were just valuable commercial goods designed to seal alliances through marriages. Little Isabelle grew up in this toxic environment, between her father's seizures and her mother's cold, calculating gaze. It was the seed of a lifelong trauma for a young girl. Court intrigues were her lullabies, and political instability was her playground. The year is 1396. Isabelle had not yet turned 6, but her fate was already sealed. King Richard II of England was tired of the 100 Years' War. Domestic rebellions were brewing in his country, and the threat of deposition was looming. Richard was desperately in need of a marriage alliance that would bring not just political, but also financial stability. He had lost his first wife and of Bohemia, and now his eyes were on France. The French advisors saw a golden opportunity in this offer. They were bankrupt from the war. They could sell peace to the English. And what did they ask for in return? The marriage of Isabelle and Richard and a 28-year truce. And the color of the money? A colossal dowry of £800,000. Think about it. To protect your own reign, you send your 6-year-old daughter to an unknown king, 23 years her senior, in an unknown country. To put it in modern terms, it was a national bankruptcy rescue operation through the sacrifice of a child. Negotiations dragged on for months. The French and English envoys discussed the terms like a cold commercial transaction, as if Isabelle were a marketable animal. Isabelle's age was even a bargaining chip. Some English advisors suggested waiting until she reached the legal age of 12 for the marriage to be consummated. But Richard said no. He needed the money and the peace now. The bride's age was less important than the stability of a kingdom. What a disgusting thought, isn't it? October 1396. The terms were finally decided. Isabelle of France would be delivered to England as a political gift. She was a lamb sacrificed on the altar of royal diplomacy. In the Louvre Palace, a magnificent display was prepared to capture the attention of the English envoys. Charles VI, though not of sound mind, blessed his little girl with tears in his eyes. Isabelle of Bavaria, however, displayed her usual coldness. For her, this was a successful business deal. And little Isabelle? She didn't quite understand what was happening. The journey to England was perhaps just a long adventure to her. She took only a few of her toys, her favorite dolls, and a small pet dog with her. Sadly, her little heart didn't know that this journey was a one-way trip. The weeks-long journey from Calais to London was full of glorious ceremonies. Every town competed to offer the most spectacular reception to the future queen. But Isabelle was exhausted by the excessive splendor, scared, and often a child crying because she wanted to go home. And then, the big day, the wedding. Richard II prepared a grand ceremony in London. St. Paul's Cathedral was adorned with a union of French and English fabrics. Thousands of candles, choirs, everything was a propaganda show designed to demonstrate to the world that England had secured peace through diplomacy. Richard, to his credit, was reluctant. A graceful man of 29, he had deeply loved his first wife. He didn't feel it was proper to marry a child, but political necessity superseded personal moral concerns. During the ceremony, Isabelle was silent. She was speechless, overwhelmed by the events. The Archbishop of Canterbury had to kneel to place the ring on her tiny finger. When she was proclaimed Queen of England, there was no joy on her face, only surprise and an increasing fear. Imagine that moment. Hundreds of people applauding a child as queen. But that child is looking around, perhaps searching for her mother's cold face. In that moment, she was not a queen, but just a lost child. Richard, to his credit, treated her more like a daughter than a wife. He appointed French tutors, allowed her to keep her language, and provided her with the honor required for a child to be raised at court. Isabelle lived in her own manner at Westminster, with a retinue dedicated solely to her well-being. She grew up like a queen, but never got to live like one. Isabelle was only 10 years old. In her eyes, there was still the innocence of that little girl, and a love that was just beginning to take shape in her heart. Meanwhile, England was in turmoil. A major rebellion broke out led by Henry Bolingbroke. The populace had turned its back on the exhausted King Richard II. Shortly after, Richard was deposed and silently disappeared within the dark stone walls of Pontefract Castle. Some say he starved to death, others that he was strangled. But Isabelle was only 10 years old, and she was widowed, a queen but also a child, without having been a wife, without even being able to say goodbye. Richard's death changed all the balances in England. It was also the beginning of a diplomatic collapse. Isabelle was a legitimate queen. Even if the marriage was not physically consummated, it was a bond in the eyes of the church. And what was worse, the £800,000 dowry sent by France for that marriage had already been spent. To send the young widowed queen back to France would also require repaying the £800,000. The new king on the English throne, Henry IV, certainly could not afford that. For him, Isabelle was no longer a child or a widow. She was a hostage, political pawn, a silent threat to be used against France in the future. Little Isabelle was sent to Havering Castle outside London. From the outside, her life was still that of a queen. Silk dresses, warm meals, servants, but every wall, every window Every step was woven with invisible chains. Her freedom was now locked away at a diplomatic table. She remained there for 3 long years. A girl of 10, losing her childhood. A young girl of 11, trying to get used to being alone. A woman of 12, having lost all hope in life. A sea had come between her and her own country, a castle between her and her own heart. Her letters to her family in France are still referred to by historians as the most poignant lines poured out from a child's heart. The voice heard in her letters is not that of a queen, but of a desperate and vulnerable girl. She once wrote to her father, "I write to you in tears, for I am held here like a prisoner, far from everything I love, with no hope of returning. Neither the morning light nor the evening prayer brings me peace. Every day is the shadow of the one before." When those lines reached the French court, they echoed silently even for King Charles VI. His daughter's tears made him feel something, even though he was mentally ill. And in 1401, after endless negotiations, threats, letters, and envoys, Isabelle's return was accepted. But the one who returned was not the 6-year-old girl who had left France so cheerfully. Instead, a 12-year-old girl returned, with fear in her eyes and emptiness in her heart. The 3 years spent in England had cast a dark shadow over her childhood. Even her smile was cautious now. She would look long before trusting someone and think before speaking. Her life had barely begun, but she was already disillusioned with it. When she returned to Paris, her home, she was not greeted with the warmth she expected. The French throne was also weakened, and the court had descended into turmoil. Her family could not welcome her with joy, because Isabelle was now not only the girl who returned, she was also the dowry that must be repaid, a reminder of an £800,000 debt. In the eyes of the royal advisors, she was no longer a person. She was a problem, an account, a file. And the question whispered in the palace corridors was the most painful of all. Now what do we do with this widow? This girl who risks us having to pay back the dowry money? This was Isabelle's most silent, most desperate period. She lost her childhood in England and her youth in France. And in the midst of it all, only one thing remained unchanged: the feeling of captivity in her heart. Isabelle's tragedy was not over yet. Friends, how unlucky was this girl to taste happiness? She was 16 years old. Her mother, Isabelle, used her again as a political commodity. This time, her husband was Charles of Orleans, a young French poet and nobleman. But this time, Isabelle achieved something that had been denied to her in childhood: a marriage based on mutual affection. Charles of Orleans was sensitive, intellectual, and genuinely in love with Isabelle. The couple found happiness in art, poetry, and a love that flourished despite the political conditions of their union. Isabelle finally experienced what it was like to be loved for herself, not as a piece of a bargain. Just here, right at this moment, as a viewer, you hope, okay, now this girl will find some peace. But history, especially this girl's history, did not end happily as you might think. The happiness was fleeting. In 1407, Charles was taken captive in a war against the English. He was captured at the Battle of Agincourt and spent 25 years as a prisoner in England. Isabelle was effectively widowed again. She was 18 years old. Life had taken the possibility of loving and being loved away from her for a second time. In the following years, Isabelle lived an inconspicuous life at the French court. She spent her time doing charity work and engaging with art. No longer the child queen, she was just a lonely and unhappy princess. Isabelle gave birth to her daughter, Joan of Orleans, who would grow up never knowing her father. Motherhood gave her some solace, but also brought pain and irony. The reality that her own daughter would likely face the same fate, being used as a political tool in an arranged marriage. Isabelle of France died in 1409, at the age of 20, from complications following childbirth. Her life had been completely dominated by the political needs of others. At 6, she was sacrificed in a diplomatic marriage. 10, she was widowed. At 12, she was imprisoned. At 16, she was married again for political expediency. And at 20, she said goodbye to life, leaving behind only a baby and a broken heart. Her death stood in stark contrast to the magnificent show that surrounded her first wedding. No one even noticed this small victim of the Middle Ages. Conclusion: the price of innocence. Friends, Isabelle's story is a profound lesson about the role of women in medieval politics and the human cost of diplomacy. She fulfilled her role as a political piece. She sealed alliances, but she never had the opportunity to live for herself. Isabelle's experience proves that noble girls were seen as transferable property between kingdoms. Their lives were subject to the political interests of their parents and husbands. From the age of 6, she carried the burdens of state that should have belonged to adults on her shoulders. Her life was a constant sacrifice offered to the gods of medieval politics. She was the price paid for a temporary peace between warring nations. Isabelle of France remains an eternal symbol of the fragility of childhood against uncontrolled political power. Her memory reminds us that behind every diplomatic treaty in history, there were often children whose lives were destroyed to satisfy the ambitions of the powerful. She paid the highest price for peace between France and England, her own happiness and, ultimately, her own life. If this story has affected you as much as it has affected me, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. What hurt you the most about Isabelle's fate? To what extent do you think such child marriages have influenced the ways of solving today's political crises? Consider that, even 6 centuries later, the problem of using children as bargaining tools continues in many parts of the world. I look forward to your thoughts. If you liked the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel to hear more of these tragic stories. See you in the next video. History is not always as bright as it seems. Take care.